Hello everyone and welcome to Tech with Robert, the Get Started with T-SQL course. In this lecture we're going to talk about the case statement. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, give a thumbs up on the video if you like what I do. That really helps me to know what I do well and what you guys want me to improve on or focus more on in the future lectures. So without further ado, let's dive right in. We can start off by creating a query here where we say that we want to select the customer key, first name, last name, let me see, dim customer. Oh, let me just switch to the correct database from the dim customer, and we could say we want the email address and number of children at home, like this. Wait, let me just actually also include the gender here. And so now we see, nothing special. We know this query. We see the customer key, first name, last name, email address, and the gender and the number of children at home. And so what if we wanted to, let's say we wanted to create a column where we want to apply some logic, and we want to create a new column based on some logic from the number of children at home. So so on our customers, we're storing the information about how many children they have at home. And let's say that our department wanted to create an analysis where we want to sort of group our customers into different descriptions based on how many children they have. So we could say that if the customer has 0 children at home, we want to say no kids, and if they have otherwise has kids, for example. And so the way we could do that is just very simply in the beginning we could say we start off by writing case, and I like to do a space and then to create a tab here. So what we do is we're saying case, and we want to say case when. So when the number of children at home is equal to 0, we want to say no kids. So then what we do is we type space and we say then, and then we can either write numbers or strings. So if we would say that, okay, if the customers who has 0 kids, we want to say that they have 1, then we would specify 1 like this. But if we wanted to say a string, we could say we need to do the single quotes here. So we could say case when the number of children at home is 0, then say no kids. And then we need to do an else, and then finally we need to end the case statement. And so, but before we end it, we say else, we can say has kids, for example. And so now we've said the case when number of children at home is equal to 0, then we want to say no kids, otherwise we want to say has kids. And then we need to say end and then give the column a name. So we could say end as number of children group, for example. And when we run that query, we see that we will get a new column here. Let's say this customer here has 0 children at home, so it says no kids. And for anyone, doesn't matter if they have 3, 5, 2, or 4, it will still has kids. So you can think of the case statement in T-SQL sort of like an if statement if you come from a programming background, or if you've worked with any programming language before. You can compare it to an if statement. So if this, then that, otherwise this. And so now we've created a column here that is based on one condition. So either they have 0 kids, then we say something, otherwise we say something else. But we could have more conditions, and so we can write another condition, and we can say when number of children at home is equal to 1, then we can say, for example, I don't know, let's say small family or something. And then we could do another one where we say when number of children at home, we could also do like this. We could say when the number of children at home is between 2 and 3, then we can say medium family or whatever. And then finally, and this is just to sort of see that we can use equal to, greater than, lesser than, and also between. And we can also use, we could say, for example, we want to say, okay, when they have 2 or 3 children, we call them a medium family. And otherwise we can say when number of children at home is bigger than 3, then we say, you know, large family or whatever. Okay. And otherwise, if they shouldn't have anything, but we could say unknown. And so now when we see here, we see that this customer here has 0 children, so we say no kids. And 3, so between 2 and 3 is medium family. And then as soon as they have more than 3, it's large family. And so then we see here, for example, this one has 4 kids at home, so we say large family. And here we have one with only 1 child, so we say small family. So you're creating a different scenarios, different cases, and then giving that, in this case, customer a specific value based on a criteria of how many children they have at home. And so we could create a new column, and we could say, for example, let's say that we wanted to see, for example, here in the gender column, we see that we have only F and M to represent whether the customer is a female or male. And if we wanted to, you know, say the whole string, we could create another case here where we could say case, when the gender is equal to M, then we want to write male. And when the gender is equal to F, then we want to write female. And we want to end that as gender description, for example. And so, see what I did here? You don't need to have the else statement. For example, in this case, we could have a case here when we have, let's say that we have 4 different cases, but there could be a 5th or a 6th case, but we don't need to sort of take them into consideration. So we could just, every row that does not meet or are within these, let's say, 4 conditions, we would just group them all together and say unknown, for example, here. But in this case, we know that they can only have either M or F in that column, so we don't need to say else something else, because we know that there's only going to be male or female. So then we can just say case when the gender is M, then male, when the gender is female, then female, and then just end that case statement and give a description. And so now we see here, for this customer is M, we say male, and this customer is a female, so we say female. And then lastly, we will just create another case statement. Here we could say, let's say, for example, we have the email addresses of each customer, and we wanted to see, for example, we want to have a new field, a column, where we say if is the email address in the correct format. And so how we determine that is whether the customer's email address contains an @ sign, for example. So we could say case when the email address, like, we can say the @ sign, and then we would say then 1 else 0, and then end, let's say let's say correct email format, for example. And so now when we run that, we will see, we will give it a number, we will give them 1. If they have an @ sign in their email address, we would say 1, otherwise 0. And then what if we have written a case here, and we want to use that in the where clause. So let's say, for example, that now we've created a column here to say to determine whether a customer has a correct email format or not, and we wanted to then filter the query to say where we only have those with one, only have those customers who has the correct email format. We cannot, if we try to write then where and we say correct email format is equal to 1, we see that we don't have that column. And so one way to use this is, which we will talk about later, we could wrap this in a subquery. And then what we would do is we need to go on top here and we could say select everything star from, and then we put this whole statement here inside the subquery, and we can give that alias an alias A, for example. And so then outside this here we could say where a dot correct email format is equal to, let's say, 0. So now we will not get anything because everyone has an @ sign in their email address, but the only way to use these columns is to wrap them inside a subquery. Otherwise, what we would have to do is, let's say we take this away here and we use the query regular that we had before. If we wanted to use this column now in a where clause, we would have to repeat the case statement. So we could say we would need to say where case when email address like @ sign then 1 else 0, for example, and then say when it's equal to 1. And so now you see now we don't have to, and as we don't need to give it a descriptive name here, because we only need to say, okay, select everything here, so where case when the email address like @ sign then 1 and 0 and equals to 1. So that is how we could use this case statement inside of a where clause. So this is it for where clause, for working with the case statement. And the next lecture we're going to talk about the having clause. So I will see you guys in the next lecture.